Hello everybody, and thank you so much for coming along. Yay. It's always nice to clap at the start, sort of sets things up well. So I'm an author. I've published 3 books. My latest book, A Kiss from Mr. Fitzgerald, came out in May. And one of the things that I've done with this, so I gave this lecture 10 times over the course of a week back at the TE conference, oh it's not TE anymore, what is it called, showing my age, conference at Curtin in June. So it's kind of been nice to have 2 months off giving the lecture to come to it fresh. And what I've done is I've put together a version of that for you that is hopefully more tailored to you guys as teachers rather than as students. There are going to be a couple of places where you might feel as if I'm going through stuff that you already know. Just bear with me with that, because what I'm trying to do is pull together voice in a framework that I think works to take everyone through it in a kind of an orderly fashion to make it make the most sense. So if there are things that you're thinking, I already know this, the reason I'm going through it is because I want to make sure that the way I'm talking about it through the lecture, everybody has the same kind of understanding in their head. It will just make the whole thing make more sense. In terms of voice, like, I know it's one of those things that is really hard to explain. Everybody has an idea of what voice is, but putting it into words is a more difficult concept. I know that if I had 5 other authors here in the room with me today and I asked them all to say what voice is, most of them would either not be able to, they'd say, well, I know what it is, but I just don't know how to explain it, or they would all come up with a slightly different definition of it. So as an author, I write fiction. Essentially my whole day is spent working with this concept of voice. I'm always thinking about the voice of my book, how I can best get that voice onto the page in such a way that the reader is drawn into the story. So in this lecture, what I've done is pull together everything that I have learned over the last 6 years or so of writing books. I also teach the concept of voice regularly to aspiring and emerging writers, so I've also drawn on some of that information as well. So I hope that you find it useful as we talk through it. In terms of what I'm going to cover, I'm going to start off by talking about the relationship between point of view and voice. It's my belief that you can't talk about voice without first talking about point of view. And so this point of view bit might be the bit where you're thinking, yeah, I already know this. But it's really important for me to cover that off first because it ties into so much of what I'm then going to cover in relation to voice. And so I'm going to start off by talking about how we talk about point of view in a way that links into the way in which we'll be describing voice. Then I'm going to look at how to talk about voice. And then what I've done is I've kept the same sample question that I used with the students when I was going through this session, because I just think it's an important way to pull everything together and say, okay, we've talked about point of view, we've talked about voice, but here is how it all comes together in terms of framing it around a kind of a question that you might use in class with your students. So I hope that that's okay to walk through it like that. The first thing I wanted to put up here is a quote from Kate Grenville, who I'm sure you all know is a great Australian writer.